Then I have number slide.
And that's not a good R,
Much
right?
less
No.
easier. Um,
I think
but I
Pete's
think
face when
that's
I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is gonna change.
You can see great pitches at demo days, on TV, or my favourite show, The Pitch. But what does the process look like before that big pitch? We take you behind the scenes here on Before the Pitch. In this episode, we're giving feedback on the investor pitch for Aftergame, an app for tabletop gamers and the communities that support them. Our pitch coaches today are Grace Esterman from Startup Dunedin and me, Pete Lead. Here's the setup. Eric will be pitching Aftergame to an angel investment group. He's aiming for a 5 to 7 minute pitch, which will be followed by 10 minutes of Q&A from the audience of potential investors. Let's take a look at Eric's draft pitch and then we'll get into pitch coaching.
I'm Eric and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Aftergame. So there are over 5,000 new tabletop games being released every year. Deciding which new games to play and managing these growing collections is an increasing challenge for players and publishers alike. We are Aftergame, and our mission is to organize the world's games. We connect players over games, record standardized play data, and providing meaningful insights. Where there is a huge amount of data and services for video games, there is an untapped niche in tabletop gaming. This includes board games, trading card games, and role-playing games, such as Dungeons & Dragons. Publishers have limited quantitative understanding of their customers and their potential customers, so they are often having to try their luck on gut instincts, surveys, or costly crowdfunding campaigns, of which 60% are unsuccessful. Players not only want to share in their hobby, but they also want to see what their friends are playing and to have meaningful recommendations. Today, there is no easy way to do this. There are public forums built for the hardcore player and apps with no easy way to connect. We are in the golden age of tabletop games. The market is experiencing rapid and sustained growth, with innovative new mechanics and formats constantly being released. 22% of tabletop players spend more than $1,000 on games annually. This is a growing hobby where there's a lot that's being spent. Aftergame brings tabletop players together and gives publishers standardized data about gameplay. We give publishers access to the data and to their customers by connecting players to the communities, as well as facilitating games and events. At Aftergame, we obsess over player experience. Our app is built around easy connection and really quick data recording. We allow players to find local games and events where they can claim seats at the table. Through push notifications, we can alert players when games they want to play are happening nearby. And we also enable tracking of games, building up leaderboards and enabling detailed entry with terms directly from the rulebooks of the games being played. You can connect with friends and soon form groups to share your gaming journey. We know the games players like and how much they play them. Aftergame will enable data-driven decisions, giving publishers understanding about their active users. This data will allow publishers new ways of targeting content to the right players, using powerful recommendation models which will be unique in the tabletop industry. We will have a subscription and a usage-based pricing structure across our free customer groups. These are the players, community, which includes event organizers, and publishers. For players, there will be the free app, but there's a premium plan which can be purchased at $5 a month, which offers AI-powered game analysis and insights, among other things. Communities and publishers, meanwhile, can purchase plans designed to scale with their usage of the app and our data. We've come to this pricing structure based on many surveys, looking at similar products in other industries, and countless conversations with our potential customers. We are seeing great early success in working closely with existing communities and event organizers. Communities are valuable for the growth of Aftergame, as they provide a core gateway to publishers and players by promoting our app to their members. We have also identified a few key games where there is a large player base, but a lack in good digital solutions for tracking players, and making it super easy to share content from Aftergame and to bring our new users onto the app is critical, and built into all new features that we're building. As our user base grows, we'll be able to leverage this data. We plan to approach publishers with specific insights on their games and the players playing the games. And this will expand into partnerships where we can enable promotion and recommendation of their games through our platform. In a year, after the game has grown from a side project solving a problem some friends and I had, to powering and matchmaking and game scheduling for major events across ANZ. We are seeing consistent growth in active users, with more than 30% of people that have come on from an event using the app beyond that time. We have made strong relations with influential communities in Australia who have been instrumental in pushing our app and giving us deep connections into the industry. And this has led to a steady stream of communities and events coming to us, all without having to spend on advertising. When forecasting, we have broken down revenue into 3 streams and projected growth based on product milestones and planned ad spends in these areas. We are assuming the majority of players will remain on the free plan to begin with, but we have identified features which will make our proposition increasingly easy to sell. We believe we can achieve these targets, keeping our headcount relatively small. I'm lucky to work with a fantastic team, and I have a strong background in engineering, leading product teams, and strategy. And John has 10 plus years in project management and an encyclopedic knowledge in games. And finally, Charlene is embedded in the board gaming community, having run community events at free game cafes across New Zealand and North America. Help us bring games to the table. We are seeking $1 million in funding. This will enable us to bring on the team we need to rapidly develop and the important features and execute on our go-to-market strategy so that we can hit $1 million ARR within 2 years. And that is after game. We connect people over games, record standardized play data, provide meaningful insights, and enable discovery of new fun. Thank you.
Grace, initial thoughts?
I really liked your pitch. I think that they're like infographics. You've kept the same thing across all of them and it looks really clean and tidy. I am curious about, so you're asking for the $1 million. Other than that, what is the key thing that you want people watching it to take away?
I guess that tabletop gaming is an overlooked industry that there's a big opportunity here, and that it's growing as well. So there's like quite a big opportunity here. So I guess I could make that come through a bit better especially in the later slides, because it's mentioned hidden in there at the start. But
I think it's like you've started really strong with there are this many people, but even having just a one-liner that means that 1 in 10 people is an active gamer or something like that relates it to people, and that's quite useful. It's having those like relatable stats.
I want to jump in on that as well, Grace, because I think that having investors, especially at the beginning of the pitch, raise their eyebrows, like having this is an interesting insight or an interesting point I didn't understand about the industry or the hobby, whatever you want to call it. Like you mentioned a few slides in, such as Dungeons and Dragons, and I think that's the first time you name a tabletop game. And I wonder if earlier than that, kind of to Grace's point, like give us an example of a game and how big it can be. You know, I imagine something like Magic the Gathering, you can probably pull out a stat that there are like, more Magic the Gathering cards in existence than there are sheep or something, that gives people an idea of like, we're not talking about Monopoly and Scrabble, we're talking about an industry they may not be aware of.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, there's heaps of that that I can add in.
Do you have offhand a stat that you can throw at us?
I'm going to misquote this number now, but there for Magic, I think it's 50 million players actively worldwide, so it's a very that's a huge one that you just mentioned there. I also kind of the amount of games, like starting off with just how much new content's coming out, because that's, I think, to me is quite eye-opening. I did not realize that just how much is coming out in tabletop, like for these physical games being made. So
There's I really liked the Kickstarter. 60% of games don't launch successfully on there, but how many of those games are there annually or monthly, or how many go up daily? Just to show the extent that new games are being published without that user data or accurate user data.
Yeah, because the number I've got is across everything. Don't actually know for the Kickstarter specifically. I'm sure I can get that from the same place.
The interesting thing about 5,000 board games a year, it's a lot, but it doesn't sound like a lot. I don't know if, 100 board games a week, it sounds like a bigger number than
What, even
5,000 a year.
10 a day. Nearly.
That's a
Maybe
good
not
point.
quite.
Yeah.
That's
But also, I think also it's probably that fact on its own doesn't maybe illustrate the point, which is, there are 5,000 board games every year that are vying for a share of that $31 billion of revenue or something, because that starts to introduce the problem, the secondary or tertiary problem that you solve, which is for publishers.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely can do more to make that better. We've actually switched around to make this the primary problem, because this is actually where we see the largest potential is on the publisher side. So I think initially when we were pitching, we'd started off with players and communities, but have now flipped it to say this is actually the problem, and the players and communities are almost, I guess, the means to get to this, solving this problem. And yeah, I think driving that home about just how crowded the market is and how they're all vying for these numbers here is, yeah, a good point. Something we can definitely do. I also noticed, I don't actually say it, but we got the amount of players, and that's something I probably should actually highlight. There's a lot of numbers here, and yeah.
Which I think is a general comment on your slides, which is there's a lot of information on them. So a lot of words and a lot of information. And so it's hard to identify, and I think to Grace's very first question, like, what's the thing that you want us to take away from this slide? And that's hard when you've got so much.
Yeah, definitely.
So you want people to be listening in to what you're saying and have that as the key takeaway, and the content on the slide to be very simple, kind of double highlighting those key points. I did notice on one slide in particular, the one where you've got 5 phones on it.
This slide is sort of like an app store layout with 5 phones, each with different screenshots on the one slide.
That's the one where I got really distracted trying to read all the things, and then my brain's like, no, Grace, you're meant to be listening. So thinking in about, is it having one phone come up with things like shared game history, record what matters to you, having them come up one at a time as you talk about them? Is it less but just making
less of them be like, would it help? Because that's something that we'd chatted in the team, because I've just literally put in I guess what's for our marketing from the App Store. Yeah, I could definitely reduce them and maybe make them match a bit more of what I'm actually saying. The problem we have is that there's no way to point to all the things we do on one phone, because they are across these 5 different screens.
Because your pitch, it's not just about this app, right? Like this, if your pitch were solely like, hey, we're doing an app for people who play board games. Here are the features of it. This would probably go over a few different slides, and you'd illustrate the problem of finding someone to play with, the problem of organizing your library at the beginning, and then you'd have, here are solutions 1, 2, 3. Now, because you're pitching a business that has 3 to 4 different stakeholders, this is only one part of it. I think the point of this slide would be for your audience to say, oh, okay, I get what this is. Not necessarily I get all the features or I understand the full value proposition. What you want them to get is, okay, this is what it is. It's a phone app for people to record board game stuff on. Yeah, and that they want to use it.
Yeah, cool. I think, I can definitely cut this down a bit. Do you think if we had 3, I just worried that I'd still have the text there. But it feels like I can't not have text.
You could probably have one phone screenshot so that we get the idea that it's something that's on your phone, and then your 3 or whatever value prop functionality in words.
Cool, yeah, that should be easy.
It's always worth coming back to, what is the purpose of this slide, or what is the outcome that I want from this slide? And this is something we see a lot in pitches, where you get to the end of it and you go, I don't understand what it is. And so the point of this is just for them to get, okay, cool, I get it, it's an app. Yeah,
cool. I think I can definitely structure this. I could do the one the one shot that hopefully gets most of it and then bring in these top points.
Is it worth us going through the pitch deck from kind of a higher level, thinking about the intent of the pitch and how each of these slides kind of builds to the end? So I guess having a quick discussion about what those key takeaways are and what are the things that you definitely need to include in that. As in, like, what's going to be the follow-up questions, kind of thinking about who their audience is, what do they want to see, and then going through the slides and kind of just double-checking, yes, this tells the story, where do we need to spend more time?
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to your first question, Grace, which was a question for Eric around what, and I'm going to put a number on this, what are the 3 things that you want your audience to take away from the pitch?
I guess tabletop industry is a growing industry that's often overlooked and not got a huge digital presence. That'd be the top one. That After Game's in a unique position where it's got a solution that can capture a lot of the market and connect these distributed personas into one cohesive product. And that we're raising $1 million and looking to expand and to capitalize on, to seize this opportunity that we see, that we think that we're pretty well positioned to take on.
Can I riff on those a little bit?
Definitely.
Love the first one. It's a growing industry. There's a big opportunity here, and it's overlooked. I really like that part of it, that this is an overlooked industry, because for your audience, investors, that's like, oh, here's an opportunity to be, Uber or Airbnb. Like, here's something that is ripe for innovation.
Yeah.
So I really like that. The kind of in a good position to capture the market. For me, there's kind of maybe two aspects of that. So one is the team and the experience of the team. You are an experienced team and you've also got momentum. So it's not just like, here is an idea, we're thinking about it. We've already started. We've got a good team on board. We're just starting to ramp up now. And I almost think, I mean, the raise is kind of, that's the way you're pitching. I don't think that needs to be emphasized. The other aspect of like capturing the market, or the first 2 points, I think the business model is really interesting, because it's how can we capture value for the whole industry, like all the different stakeholders in the industry, and have that kind of build on each other. The more publishers you have on board, the more valuable that is for the users and the communities. You're using community to reach more users. So it's like, flywheel, network effects, whatever you want to call it. I think that's really interesting. Like, you're not just an app for recording games. You've thought through, this is how it's going to operate. Like, this is how the business model is going to operate, and this is how we get really big and valuable.
Yeah. So would this be a good place here to talk about, because I actually haven't really mentioned that flywheel anywhere. You can probably glean it from a few places in a few slides, but not really actually mentioned. So would this be the place where you'd talk through that point more?
I'm curious to hear from Grace, because she's less familiar with After Game than I am. What came across in that aspect of things?
When you're talking about After Game, I kind of get indications of the different types of customers and the different personas, but it would be useful to have it like premium is for people that play a lot of games and that want to find out more, and that often have disputes over what rule is correct, kind of personifying them, a community. These players then build into the community, that community then builds into the publishers, and that circle with a little bit more detail, a little bit more personifying those things and those community spaces, I think would build in a lot to the story, and how, as you were saying, kind of to that second point that you mentioned before around capturing the market and the different personas with one simple app.
So for this slide, would it actually, just also thinking on the time I've got, is it probably worth, like, I could scrap a lot of what I'm currently saying where, like how we came to these numbers. That probably doesn't even need to be mentioned around. I guess everyone's going to assume that we've talked to users and we've got we've done some research to come to this.
And it's like those kind of questions are the ones that, if they want to ask it, they'll ask it in the Q&As. You know, how did you reach these numbers?
Right.
You'd
Yeah.
explain it. So I feel like some of that detail is a nice to have, and it's really interesting. But the explanation of why there's 3 tiers, what different customer segments they get, capture, how that works in together,
Yeah.
is probably slightly more important, because it demonstrates the story that, you know, you're starting, we have got these numbers, we're going to these community events, and that helps explain why your traction has that story. Does that
Yeah.
kind of make sense?
That totally makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's good.
Let's nail down what are the key things you want your audience to take away from the pitch. I'm going to throw it to you again, Eric, because this is your pitch. What do you want them to take away?
The overall pitch.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, taking away definitely the raise, because that's a given. I wouldn't be doing this if I needed the money. Yeah, I mean, still definitely the growing industry. I think then we could rephrase that second one around how we're uniquely positioned, more that we, I think, understand how we can use each of the different personas, the different, I guess, players in this industry, to leverage each one to kind of like make this self-fulfilling, like this growing business model. I think that, and like that we really understood, and then we've looked at it, done a lot of our research and how we can figure out how to leverage that. Just talked around the circles there, but yeah, I think that's definitely not coming across. Like, there's probably this slide, and there's another one, this one here, where I think it's probably one of the first places where we start tying it together a bit, and maybe this is somewhere I can start introducing that these are like how there's all the interactions between all these different personas, and where Aftergame can sit in between all of us. I guess, yeah, the third one would probably have to come to the team then, like that we are a pretty strong team for an early startup, that we got a good mix of industry experience and people that have built successful products.
I want to slightly challenge your very first one.
Okay.
You know, you said we are doing a $1 million race. And I think what I'm going to say goes without saying, but it's why you should invest in the $1 million race for Aftergame, which is a slightly different, but kind of goes without saying when you say we're raising $1 million, but that why and what's gonna move that person to be like, yep, this is gonna return my investment, or whatever their intent behind investing in companies is, hitting that why. Why you? Why now? I think you hit a lot of the parts of it. How are you going to get there?
Yeah. So can I dig into what you're saying, Grace? Like,
Yeah,
what I
do.
heard you say was, instead of the kind of factual, we are opening a round and raising $1 million, more of the why should investors invest, as opposed to an invitation to invest.
Got it. A lot of it's coming down to the actual the growth that the company shows there. I think it's really down, I guess, to the potential of this business model. So it does come back to them getting, like, I think it probably has to come back to this and them believing this flywheel, that they can see there's big growth that could happen off of this, and that, I guess, at this stage is a lot of the opportunity in the team. So
Can I voice what I think Grace has identified, which is it's almost giving the investors FOMO, showing your ambition, showing the scale and the speed at which you're going to grow, and basically saying, like, now is your opportunity to invest before we hit, this massive upward trajectory. So I would almost say, if it's that final slide when you're saying this, it's probably not going to come across. And maybe what Grace is not hearing earlier on is that huge ambition, huge inflection point or something for where you're about to grow. So one of the, I don't know, say the best pitches, but like a pitch I remember basically finished with "We don't need your money," and then everyone was like, "We want to give you our money." Like they were like, we're doing super well, we're growing. Like, yeah, we're not actually raising. And then everyone went up to them afterwards and like, "Would you please take my money?" And I think that's maybe Grace, I'm keen to hear from you, but I wonder if that's kind of what Grace is identifying with, like just saying we're raising $1 million as opposed to now is your chance to invest $1 million in this amazing thing that's about to take off. Grace.
Yeah, I think you've covered it. And is it that hero statement, like, we are going to be the world best, we're going to be the Uber for board games, or the Amazon, kind of, but also, what's next on your radar? So you show your traction, and you talk about, I need $1 million to get to here. Are there any stepping stones that, cool, in 6 months I'm going to do this, in this much time I'm going to do this, and you'd be silly not to get on board now.
Yeah. Would that be something that could, like, this slide was one I wasn't sure on.
I also am not sure on it because there's a lot of data there, and I don't know which bit I'm meant to be looking at.
All of it.
There's a lot of information.
This is one I'd seen online, some other startups using something similar, but I'm almost wondering if this is the place to tell that story of like and this is actually, I think we've had conversations on this in the past, Pete, around the growth that we're already seeing, because we're already seeing some pretty good traction and where we think we can grow, and then what we could do if we could expand our headcount due to ad spend.
And it may be saying a line like, look at this growth that we've had with a small team. Imagine if we had a few more in our team, we could really make the most of these opportunities and increase the rate that we're growing. And it could just be a graph. I'd think of whether there's one or two of these metrics that really illustrate that story and just stick with those, or whether it's a completely different thing altogether, whether it's just your classic hockey graph, your Nike swoosh, but thinking about what's that story and what, as an investor watching, oh wow, they can definitely do this if they have that money. They've got the team, they've got the heart, they've got the passion, they know this industry. They just need a bit of cash, you know?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, I think this is definitely one that this one can be redone completely, and hopefully help, like off the back of the where we've. I guess what I was wanting to show is what we've done in the last year, and some milestones along the way. I added some of the. I mean, these icons won't mean much to probably anyone that I'm talking to, but they're just some of our customers right now. So
another way you could get across what we've talked about using the information that is in this slide, it could be, we launched Invite Only in May. In October, we ran our first event that was using Aftergame. Since then, we've been to X more, and we've built connections with another blah, including whatever the one in Europe is, so that you're showing that kind of global thing and the momentum. So it's less about detailed data, but more about that story of we're moving quickly, we're making the connections. People are already talking to us about being their sole platform for board game and tabletop conferences or something.
Yeah. Could it be then combined, like getting rid of almost all the contents of these two and just combining these two slides into up to now, and then like with the extension on the graph, and having something like probably monthly active users as the one that I'd use as to graph out?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, the stat on here that is more interesting than anything else is 100k plays logged. That to me is a more interesting stat than the 500 monthly active users. And you could even just have a page of all of the different cons, the ones that you've been to, the ones that you are coming up, and 100k plays logged. To me, that would get across, we're legit, we're growing, things are happening. Because remember, again, it's almost that feeling of momentum that you want the investors to have, so that you then have the follow-up conversation with them where you can get more into the detail, or in the Q&A they ask about active users or something.
Yeah. And interesting, I actually almost didn't put the 100k players log because I was worried that that's more of a vanity metric and not actually one that comes back to the bottom line of so what? Like, I guess.
Well, you remember that you started the pitch with publishers.
Mm,
And so for publishers, they want to know who's playing the game, how are they playing the game.
mm,
So that's your data. That's the value that you're providing to publishers.
yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's up. It's actually
Like,
it's almost 150k, so I might
damn.
it.
Oh, look, that's a great little. I know you're pre-recording it, but that's a great detail you can throw into a pitch, which is like, actually, as of today, that's 150.
Yes. Yeah.
Bit of theatrics.
Hmm. There's probably then still a need for a projection slide of some kind.
Yeah, and again, you feel like a very data-driven person. Around pitches, I'm much more of a story person, but story with data, right? So like the data that you've got here around 100k plays logged, size of the market, etc., that's important to include in a story. Your forward projection, again, considering the time limit and the purpose of the pitch is come and talk to us afterwards. It's hitting those highlights of we're raising this so that we can get to, as you've got in the raise slide, we're aiming for 1 million ARR, 250 active users. I think you talked about, like in the previous slide, you talked about 50 publishers. It comes back to the ambition that you're showing so that investors can see a pathway to a 10 to 100 times exit. And that's kind of an emotional thing, slash it's almost a binary thing of like, is this worth looking into? Is this not worth looking into? Yeah. And if you're up there pitching saying, we're going to get all 5 million Kiwis on the platform at $5 a month, to be like, cool, that's never going to return my money. But if you're talking about 3 different stakeholders with revenue streams, global ambition, growing to 1 million ARR in the next year and a half to 2 years, they can start to see that trajectory, and that becomes a yes, I want to have a follow-up conversation.
Yeah. Cool. So I can probably boil this down to, I'm wondering if I just have it down to like almost the numbers here. Just out on the slide and then talk about, I guess, where we see it going.
The numbers on these slides?
Just 50 publishers, 1,000 communities, 250 active users, players.
Yeah, and that gets us our 1 million ARR. I think the stuff below the line is interesting for a follow-on conversation. Really confusing for a pitch.
Good to know. That, I had a lot of doubts on the slide, but I was just like, I'll get feedback on it.
Grace, what have we not talked about that you think is relevant to talk about in this pitch?
I was actually just going through my notes that I had written. But I think we've talked about the first thing says great consistent imagery and like the branding. Then I've put the 5 phone slides. Then I have the customers and how that cycle works with the subscription slide. Then that's when I wrote what's the most important takeaway. Then I put timeline looking forward, but I think you have covered it, and especially if you make those changes that we were just talking about. That's covered. Then I have numbers slide.
And that's not a good R, right?
No.
Easier.
I think Pete's face when I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is going to change.
I'm not good at looking at a graph with numbers. Well, like graphs, yes. Table, no.
Yeah.
And then
It was a good exercise for us to go through and do that to validate that the million is a good amount. Like, actually, if we do hit these predictions, like, we're actually going to get like almost go into profitability quite soon. Like after this, so that's quite cool to see.
The one other thing I have written down is runway, which you have articulated in this slide, but if you change it, it might change. So just putting in that.
Is that something that you need to put in the slide, or is that a follow-on, or Or do I need to just mention it? Because
It could
we
be
are
in
looking
the
at 24 months.
documentation.
Sorry?
Pete, what are your thoughts?
I know that in this context, it's accompanied by a 1 or 2 pager, the drop sheet, and you've probably put that detail in the drop sheet.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think it's covered then.
without the drop sheet, it's probably, again, it's like a calculation that investors would do in their head of reasonableness, etc. Like 1 million, year runway, 2-year runway, 5-year runway also speaks to your ambition. Like, if you were to say, we're raising $1 million, that'll give us a 5-year runway. And be like, well, how fast are you going to be moving then? If you were to say, raising $1 million, that gives us 24-month runway. But
Yeah.
yeah, in this circumstance, I don't think you need to say it. I think I'll throw to Eric. I know you haven't been taking notes. What are your big takeaways so far from this conversation?
I think I got to be more targeted on what I want the takeaways from people listening to the pitches. So really hammering in those top 3 things. I think I'm inconsistent in that messaging. Less on my slides still. I think I'm hoping some like this is like a good maximum.
Yes.
And that there are some like this that's going to go. Change this one. Probably a lot here as well.
Yeah.
So try to reduce even further what's on the slides to get really that key point across is the main thing. I did have questions around like the ordering of slides. That's something that I struggled with, especially like for the team slide. It's kind of wedged in the middle of like between the ask and like I guess more of a traction and like projections. I wasn't sure if that was the right place, and I guess early on as well, like the problem, market size, solution, ordering, wasn't sure if that's like the right layering on the story. But obviously problem first, but
There are schools of thought on slide ordering. There are schools of thought that are, you put it in the order that investors are used to seeing it, and you don't change it because they're used to seeing it in that order. And there are schools of thought which are change it around to tell the most compelling story or to tell the story that you want to tell. I've heard put your strongest parts of the story first. And for you, I think team is a strength. And I'm saying that both as you have a strong team and compared with other startups that they may be seeing pitches from, that might be a big strength. So generally, I'm of the school of thought where you switch around the slides to make your story work. And often in a 5-minute typical structure startup pitch, the first half of your slide is really compelling story. Then you get into the numbers, and then you finish with your hero statement of help us change the world.
Yeah.
So I think that didn't answer your question.
Kind of. I think, yeah. Because I just didn't feel right to put it any earlier, but it also felt a little out of place where it is.
At the beginning, so you introduce yourself, then you talk about that market. What's that 3rd and 4th slide? I'm just curious now.
Problem for publishers.
So you've got problem for customers.
And problem for players.
Because it almost could fit in there. But think about that story and that what's the storytelling? It's that the market's huge. There's no easy way to track for players. How do we know this? This is because we have lived and breathed it. This is our team. We are all really involved in the community. Then go on. But, it can fit anywhere.
Yeah.
I think in your pitch it can fit anywhere because the beginning of your pitch is really interesting. Telling someone here is an industry that is very large, that is growing and that is underserved. That is enough of an attention grabber to go, I'm going to keep listening for a minute and see what you have to say. I think you could lean into that more. And in terms of that slide where you talk about the players, the publishers, the communities, I think it's okay to assume for a general audience, as this angel group is going to be, that they don't understand the industry. And so you can spend 30 seconds explaining or introducing the industry, and then talking about where you fit and what you're doing. So you're essentially teaching them this is how the tabletop industry works. There are publishers who design and publish games. There are players who play the games, and in between there are these conventions, board game cafes, events, etc., so communities and events that everyone interacts with, and there are really big ones around the world that have blah blah blah. The problem that publishers have is there are 5,000 new, 100 new games every second, and even if they've had a successful game, they don't know what to follow it up with, or whatever it is. From the player's side, board games are a communal thing, and you can't always find someone to play with or to find someone to play the particular game with. Communities and events exist to bring all these people together, and so does Aftergame. What we do is blah blah blah, which would mean you're going to be presenting a lot less information about Aftergame and really focusing on those, well, like, what are the 3 things you want people to take away? Like, here is the underserved industry. Here's some examples of how big it is, juicy growing market, etc. Here's where we fit and how we take advantage of this system and have it be self-perpetuating, etc. Here is the team and the momentum we have so far, our ambitions, where we're headed. Now is the time to get on at an affordable price. Come and talk to us afterwards with your checkbooks open.
Yeah. The way you're almost like describing when to, like, I guess, talk through the industry and like talk through all the players. Is that almost before the problem?
Kind of.
Yeah, I think I can really see how this could work much better now. Bringing those forward and introducing that, and then it kind of flows a bit nicer. And I've started with the big points at the start, rather than I mean, this does speak a little bit to the underserved nature of the industry, but it's like they don't necessarily know what tabletop publishers are.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
But yeah, in that structure, team would go in the second half. Yeah, you've got an interesting business model in terms of the many different ways you could tell the story with the different aspects of the product, different aspects of the industry. Nice. All right, we are going to catch up with Eric after the pitch, and we're going to see what he changed in his pitch and how things went. A few days after that pitch coaching session, Eric made some changes and pitched to those angel investors. You saw the before pitch for Aftergame. Now here's the Aftergame pitch before the pitch.
Hi, my name is Eric, co-founder and CEO of Aftergame. Our mission is to organize the world's games. There are over 100 new tabletop games released every week. Deciding which new games to play and managing these growing collections is an increasing challenge for players and publishers alike. Tabletop games is a broad term which describes anything from board games, trading card games, and role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. There are a lot of stakeholders across the industry, with each having limited connections. The main interface to players is through retailers, gaming groups, and local meetups. This is an overlooked industry worth over $31 billion and expected to almost double by 2028. We are measuring our market size by both global game sales, where there's $25 billion with 15% profit margins, and the $6 billion of value in app subscriptions for 100 million tabletop players who spend a lot on this hobby. Where there's a huge amount of data and services for video games, there is an untapped niche in tabletop games. Publishers have limited quantitative understanding of their customers, so they often try their luck on gut instinct, surveys, or costly crowdfunding campaigns, of which 60% are unsuccessful. Players not only want to share in their hobby, but they also want to see what their friends are playing and to have meaningful recommendations. Today, there is no easy way to do this. There are public forums built for hardcore players and apps with no way to connect. Aftergame brings us all together. We unite players and their community by facilitating events and matching local people to others who want to play the same games. We incentivize and give easy ways for players to record all information about the games they play, which provides value not only for the players, but also for the publishers. This allows us to give publishers an unrivaled, holistic view of their active users, and perhaps more importantly, enables targeting the right players with the right content. This is all achieved with the Aftergame app. Players organize their collection, find the games they want to play, and add to their wish list. The app helps bring people together by notifying players when games in their want-to-play list are happening nearby. Events and conventions use the app to schedule games, allow booking of games from the library, and help attendees find others to play with. We make it incredibly easy to record results of any play session. This can build up leaderboards, analyze details for competitive play, or just help players know which games they enjoyed and may want to actually buy themselves. We know the games players like and how much they played them. This allows us to build player demographics based on factors that actually matter. Forget age, gender, and other less relevant details when advertising your newly released expansion. Let's target that player who played your game 6 times in the last month. This kind of recommendation and content targeting is common in other forms of entertainment, but will be unique in tabletop game industry. Our business model aims to capture the whole industry in a way where all different stakeholders build on each other. The Aftergame app is free so that it is accessible to as many players as possible. This is good as they provide value upstream. We will, however, have a premium plan for players, which we believe can capture 4% of our users. Communities and publishers, meanwhile, can purchase plans designed to scale with their usage of our app and our data. Our go-to-market starts with existing tabletop communities, where our app provides great value and we've seen some early success. Communities are important for our growth as they provide us access to our ideal users and promote our app heavily to their members. As our user base grows, we will be able to leverage our data. To show our value, we plan to approach publishers with specific insights on their games and their players. We also see opportunity to partner with key publishers to increase our audience and build game-specific experiences. In a year, Aftergame has grown from a side project solving a problem some friends and I had to powering matchmaking and game scheduling for major events across ANZ. Each play log is a rich data point for publishers, so it is a number we're watching closely, and we are seeing recent feature improvements increase usage and data quality. The events that use Aftergame have had overwhelmingly positive feedback from both organizers and players. This is reflected in every single event who have tried Aftergame committing to using us again, and many wanting to expand how they use our app. I have a strong team working on Aftergame, and I have a background in engineering, leading product teams, and strategy. John has 10 plus years in project management and an encyclopedic knowledge in games. And Charlene has been running events at board game cafes across New Zealand and North America for the past 8 years. Help us bring games to the table. We are seeking 1 million in funding. This will enable us to bring on the team we need to rapidly develop key features and execute on our go-to-market strategy so that we can hit 1 million in ARR within 2 years. And that is Aftergame. Thank you very much.
How did the pitch go, Eric?
Yeah, I think it went quite well. It definitely got the message that I wanted to get across much better, especially the first time I tried it with you guys. Good feedback, good interest off the back of that. Yeah, I was quite happy with the message that we delivered, that we got through the key points and introduced people to this new industry that probably most people in the room had never even really thought about before. So
Yeah. Grace, you had a bit of a conversation with some of the people in the audience afterwards.
Yeah, it was funny. One guy came up to me afterwards and was like, "Oh, Aftergame's quite interesting. What an underutilized market and a good opportunity." And I kind of sat there like, very true. I wonder if that was the key message. It was great.
Definitely one of them. If we can jump back to kind of the week in between when we did the pitch coaching with you and when the pitch had to be recorded and live, actually, I think it was like a weekend.
yes, that was quick.
What was that? How was that process for you? What insights did you get from that?
As really focusing on those key messages. So I think that the biggest takeaway I got from our original pitch coach session was, focusing on those key points that I want to get across. and really, I guess, reducing a lot of the information shown on the slide, and making it so that it can be really focused on what I wanted to show. So that I think there's probably the first day of it was like really just taking a big step back, really like going through the whole thing and going through like each slide by slide is like, is this helping to that key point? And then recrafting that story. And I think it really helped that feedback that I had. Like, I think there was a few parts of it that just like because of the ordering, and the ordering really helped a lot in my case. It was like getting like, okay, introducing the industry and then really going in around like the key point that the person that spoke to Grace said, like, getting that like point across, and that we were well positioned to take that. So yeah, it was it's very difficult sometimes reducing words, because sometimes when you have the whole thing out there, it's just easier. Like you think like this tells it all, but then it's like, what's the key point in each slide? Was a bit of a challenge, but yeah, because it worked out quite well in the end. And yeah, it really had to start though with taking that step back and reviewing it like start to end. So
I assume you'll always be updating the pitch based on conversations you had. You rapidly answered 11 questions in 10 minutes straight after the pitch, which is amazing. From the questions that came through and, conversations you've had, what other changes are you thinking about making from the pitch?
Yeah, so I think one that I'm quite happy I didn't address in the pitch, but has came up in the night, and I saw a few questions that related around it, is like around competitors. I think because the industry is quite a new one to people in the story I'm telling, it's fine to not talk about them too much, as long as I obviously know and research and can come up with answers. So that's something that there's a few questions around there, and I personally haven't changed the pitch at all off the back of those questions. There were questions around the business model, and in particular, I had like 2 or 3 people that were asking, why are you charging players when you want to get them for free? And it's like, so that's clearly from the pitch. It's like it might be that even though I say it in one little line, it's the message that they got away from that is that players have to pay $5 a month, and which obviously doesn't make sense if we're trying to grow the user base and get the upstream value. So that's something I'm going to make a bit more clear, is that it's like, free, but there is a premium plan that we can capture a small percentage of players, but most players will be free, because having free players is obviously very important for communities and for publishers. So
I know you've been having some conversations with VC investors. How does that compare to the 5-minute stand-up pitch that you did for Mainland Angels?
Yeah, so almost all my VC conversations haven't really touched the pitch at all. Like, it's all just you kind of strung that out into a half-hour, 40-minute conversation, and the key message is still something you want to get across, but you get more time to elaborate, and it's kind of a more natural flowing conversation through it. It still helped me with I guess the core points I wanted to get across. Even in these conversations, I still try to come back to it's an overlooked industry, the size of the industry, its growth, and I guess our go to market, how we're capturing that. Also talking about attraction, so kind of get all those points in there. But I'm yet to actually have to pitch again since that pitch event with the VCs I've been talking to. So yeah, it's much more just organic conversations, lots of questions, and talking through, I guess, going deeper if we need to on things.
Yeah. What's the kind of the steps in that process? So from you contacting a VC, you're just doing that via introduction, email, and organizing a coffee?
Yeah, so it's there's been a few different ones. So there's like a bunch of VCs that I already had in my network through existing connections or conversations we had in the past, and I've been kind of keeping them along on the journey. So those ones are really easy to reach out to, just like, hey, we're now raising, would be good to have a chat. With ones I haven't had a conversation with, it's either there's been 2 ways. So either existing VCs I'm talking to saying like, oh, we often invest with this other VC, so they've also introduced me to a new one. So very easy intro, but it's a very warm one, and there it just goes into a conversation. Like we organize a quick chat and see where it goes from there. There's been the ones I'm kind of doing the cold outreach to. It's normally a really quick email about a headline with the overlooked industry and how big it is, and that we're raising. And normally I've been putting in just a drop sheet, so just a 2-pager of all the information. I find it easier to share. The pitch is definitely more something that's great for presentation, and in all of those, it's going to that first conversation. That's that one where it's quite, I guess, a free-flowing conversation that covers everything in the pitch, but it's that getting just get to know each other. And then, yeah, there's been a few that goes on to the next conversation, which is normally a deeper dive on the product, the business model, the size of the market. And the thing that I've learned from this, and that I think is quite important to know, is that often you're speaking to one person in this VC firm, but then they then end up pitching your product to their rest of the team to decide if that's an investment opportunity they want to go for. So you got to kind of give them ammunition and get them on your side, because then they're kind of batting for you. And that, like, often these larger VC firms have like an internal weekly meeting. It's like, which one are we going to go forward on? So that's been, yeah, so it's kind of like really trying to give them every reason to really bat for you in those conversations so that they continue, because the decisions made without you in the room. So it's something, but yeah.
And presumably they're going with like, what are the top 3 things that they got out of the conversation, and to pitch it internally. So it really does come down to knowing what are the things you want someone to take away from a pitch, a conversation, an email.
It's mostly on that, like crafting that message and getting like really thinking through the key points that I want to get people to come away with that. I think it's going through that process has been very helpful.
The audience for your pitch was investors. In case anyone is watching who's not an investor but does play board games or tabletop games, why should they use Aftergame?
There's multiple reasons. If you want to find other groups or people that are playing games or events that are happening nearby, Aftergame is great for that, for making those new connections and finding what's out there. And also for keeping a memory of the games you had, leaderboards, or anything. If you've got any bit of competitiveness in you, like having that kind of bragging rights leaderboard is something that we do quite well. And yeah, just like finding your next game, finding what other games are out there, and discovering more about tabletop.
That was Before the Pitch. Thank you to our guest pitch coach, Grace Esterman. And thanks to our founder, Eric Poulin, for letting us take a look at the pitch before the pitch. Music for this episode was 11 Miles Per Hour by Beat Mechanic, sourced from the Free Music Archive. Before the Pitch is produced by me, Pete Lead, and Startup Dunedin. Graphic design is by Tim Steele, and this season is supported with funding from Otago Community Trust. We'll see you in a future episode, but for now, that number slide, it's got a lot going on.